right. I've got one story in this video. It's not the longest video I've ever done, but it's a terrifying, violent encounter. And I don't hear too many of these. This is kind of rare, but I have heard them before. And I've heard of people having very violent interactions with Bigfoot. And this is one of them. It's a scary story. The writer wants to be anonymous. It actually happens to him and his friend, and neither one of them want their name out there. So here's what he writes. My friend and I had a terrifying encounter with these creatures. We talk about it from time to time when we see each other. We haven't told anyone about this encounter, and I just recently told my wife. He wants his name to be private, and so do I. If you'd like to tell our story on your channel, you're welcome to do that. I want to tell this to someone who has more experience with these encounters. Man, I have no experience with these encounters. I've never experienced a Bigfoot in my life. So I just want to make that clear to everybody listening and to the writer. But I am going to share your story because it's awesome. My first encounter happened when I was 16 years old. On November the 23rd, 2014, the second day of Alabama rifle season, I headed to the woods. I got to my normal spot about 4:30 a.m. and I slowly crept into the timber, watching my steps, trying not to break any sticks. I walked about 250 yards and I finally sat down with my back up against a rock on top of a hill overlooking a holler about 150 yards wide and a quarter-mile long. I sat for about 5.5 hours. Finally, I saw the buck that I had been chasing for the last 2 years, and he was trailing a doe. The doe had seen or smelled something and left the holler, so I slowly started to follow them right after I finished my lunch. I caught a few glimpses of the buck, but I never got a decent shot. I then found myself following a creek on the backside of our property. I walked it for about an hour, hoping to see my deer or any deer, and I sat down and I waited for another 2 hours and I didn't see anything, so I decided to slip out of there. I took a drink of my water and began to head for the truck when I put my water back into my backpack, put it on, and slung my rifle onto my shoulder. I walked a short distance and I heard a loud crash. I dropped down to a knee and my rifle to my shoulder, safety off, and my eye in the scope looking towards the sound. A doe came running wide open, tail up, straight at me, and passed about 30 yards below me. I thought a monster buck would be chasing after her, so I got ready. But instead of a deer, a huge dark figure appeared in my scope. I had my scope zoomed all the way out and I was looking in the direction from which the doe came. I couldn't tell what this thing was, but I assumed it was a bear. My crosshairs were centered on its chest. I could finally make out a face in my scope, and then it turned its head and it looked right at me. I was suddenly afraid, but I needed to stand my ground and not run. Still staring at me right in the face, it stood upright and I could see its face better. I expected to see the muzzle of a bear, but that's not what I saw. Its face was flattened, almost like a pug's face with wrinkles where the jowls turned down. Its body was almost human-like and it was covered in thick, dark hair, and it was a male for sure. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I needed to get out of there and I started backing out. I expected this creature to follow me, but it stayed where it was. I eventually hit the old logging road, which got me to my truck. And when I got home, my father asked me how my hunt went. I told him I saw the big buck that I had been chasing, but I never got a good shot. And that is all I told him. A friend and I went coyote hunting on September the 22nd, 2016, almost 2 years later, near the place of my first encounter. My buddy was the only person I had told about the encounter 2 years prior, and it was in the back of both of our minds as we entered the woods. About 3 in the afternoon, we got nestled into a little hiding spot about 75 yards from a coyote den that I had previously scouted. We turned the game call on with a fawn distress call, and started the call at a low volume, and we increased the volume over the span of about 10 minutes. We waited for the coyotes to show up for 2 hours, calling off and on, but we got no response, so we were bored and got ready to pack out. We started back to the truck, and it all started. I heard a loud grunt, and we both froze. I began to scan the woods around us, and at about my 2 o'clock, only 20 or 30 yards away, stood a young Bigfoot. It was shorter than the one I had seen 2 years earlier. It had to have been a young animal. My buddy saw it too and raised his rifle, and then a roar came from behind us. It shook my bones and it was deafening. We swung around and there were 2 adults behind us just up the hill, and they were both growling like dogs. My friend was locked onto these creatures, and I grabbed his backpack and started pulling him. He regained his composure and he covered our retreat to the rear, and I moved with my eyes forward. We had to get out of there. I think we moved maybe 10 or 15 yards, and the small one rushed straight at us. I will never forget its growl and its teeth showing as it moved towards us with incredible speed. My partner squeezed off 2 rounds in the dirt in front of the animal, and it turned at an angle and it missed us. That is when all hell broke loose. The largest one, a 9-foot-tall male, came straight at us, head down in a full sprint, roaring like a grizzly bear. The female followed right behind the male, making the same terrifying roar, teeth bared and with full intent to get to us quickly. But the male came to a stop only 10 or 15 feet from us, throwing dirt and leaves all over us in the process. And he started to back off very slowly. With a minute to think, I started looking around for an exit, but it was hopeless. We were backed into a corner, so to speak. The female had moved around to our right, and the juvenile was opposite her. We were surrounded with no escape other than a steep incline right at our backs. The male rushed us again, and I immediately moved towards him and I shouted, "Get the F off us and let us get out of here." That stopped him in his tracks. I guess he didn't expect that. He roared and he snapped off a big tree limb and he slung it in our direction. And then he charged again. He wasn't going to stop this time. I raised the shotgun and I sent a load of buckshot straight into his chest. He stumbled and he dropped to one knee and tried to shimmy sideways to get away from us. And my buddy started squeezing off rounds, hitting him several times in the chest and the abdomen with his rifle. We still needed to deal with the female, and she was not happy. She instantly charged as the male had done. I was empty and I dropped my shotgun and I pulled my .45 and I started shooting in her general direction. I didn't have time to aim. She was too close and she was coming too fast. I'm sure I hit her with both shots, but I only remember her arm being jolted by a .45 round. She fell past us on the left, and as she did, I emptied the rest of the .45 hollow points in her direction as I turned with her. She roared in pain, but got up quickly and ran towards the young creature and up the hill with him following. The male was limping right behind them, and then they were gone. We got to the truck and I called my father. He and my uncle got there real fast. We were so shaking that I didn't think I could drive. I told them the whole story with tears rolling down my face, and then we took them to where it all happened. While we were there, they found some blood and hair. They took us home and later went back and tracked the blood for a long way, but they never found the creatures. I actually began to feel bad about the whole thing, and my father and my uncle told us that we did what we had to do to get out of there. They told us to shake it off and to get our heads straight, and we began to feel a bit better. I didn't see my friend for about a month after that, but when I did see him, we started talking about the whole event. We went over it detail by detail, and we had both seen the same thing with some varying assumptions depending on our angle of sight. Now that we both knew exactly what had happened and had confirmed that we were forced to defend ourselves, we decided that we wouldn't talk about it to anyone. They would all call us crazy and think down upon us. We haven't said a word about it until now. Thank you for your time, sir. I feel like there's been a weight lifted off my back. It's good to tell the story to someone who understands. If we had not shot those nasty things, they would have killed us both that day. I'm sure of it. I want to spend the rest of my life never running into one of these creatures again. Woo! What a story. What a story. Like I said in the beginning, it's very rare that I get these kind of stories. You know, the channel would probably do better if we had these exciting stories and big shootouts with Bigfoot in every video, but that's not what I do. But every once in a while, we get one like this. And again, I've heard stories of people killing these things and shooting them and getting excavators, digging holes and burying them because they know if they report the animal, you know, all kind of weird things are going to happen to them, you know, from quote government officials or whatever that means. But it really is rare that we get these kind of stories, and when we do, they're unreal. And it makes me wonder how many times, you know, hunters go missing. It's not uncommon for a hunter to go missing. It may be pretty rare, but it does happen. I mean, guys go out in the woods to hunt and nobody ever sees them again. Now, a lot of guys fall out of their stands or, you know, they get injured or hurt or whatever. But there are some cases where hunters, they take off deer hunting one morning and nobody ever sees them again. And it makes you wonder what happens to the people who aren't fortunate as these guys, because apparently some of these Bigfoot are pretty vicious. They're not happy you're there. It sounds like they attack people. It may have been because these guys were armed. I don't know. It may have been because there was a young one around. I don't know. But I'm just rambling. But this story was so interesting to me, and I was really excited to share it with you guys. And I really hope you enjoyed it. So thanks for listening to the video, and I guess we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.